Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and I have a fun topic for you today, but I am very interested, as always, in having a fun chat with all of you this evening. And if you were watching the other day, you would know that intern Clay had his time shortened a little bit because I had to go to dinner with my wife's family. So he is standing by, very anxious to jump in. But where I wanted to begin the show today is the other night when we were talking ball. One of the questions that came up was about the 30 visits that the Vikings have had. And it's always been my feeling on the visits that you just don't want to put too much emphasis on that when we're trying to figure out who the Vikings are going to pick. And I also sometimes think, I don't really want to necessarily guess it right. I don't care if I guess it right or wrong. It's sort of like taking a look at your Christmas presents before you open them or something, or seeing your parents shopping for Christmas. So I'd rather be surprised and talk about all the options. And I also don't want my opinions to be shaped by who they bring in for visits, because sometimes teams bring guys in on purpose to sort of do a little subterfuge or whatever, make somebody think, well, are they really interested in that guy? Why are they looking at that guy? So for all those reasons, I've always put those aside a little bit. And whenever I get asked about, oh, they had this guy in for a visit, my response is always, maybe he'll be their guy, maybe he won't. And someone pointed out the other night that they have had most of their players that are their first picks in for visits before they take them, which is interesting. I don't know if it's exactly predictive of what they're going to do this year, but it is interesting nonetheless. So I decided, let me go look for some information as we are marching down the stretch to the NFL draft and see what I can see about who the Vikings have had in for visits. And we could toy with that information a little bit, have a discussion about it. But of course, your questions, comments, thoughts doesn't have to be on who's been in for a visit, but I thought I would go looking for, what can I find on this? Is there anything interesting out there about who the Vikings have had in for a visit? And the answer is yes. And actually, it's a guy who is from Minnesota by the name of Kent Wayroush, I believe is how it is pronounced. He's got a website that deals with analytics in football. And one of the things he does, and I think that this just shows you how absolutely ludicrous we are about the NFL draft, that Kent has been tracking all the visits for all the teams in the NFL, which again is absolute madness. And if this man isn't walking around Minnesota with a neck roll on 24/7, then I don't know what he's doing. But we will take advantage of the fact that he has been keeping very close track of all this on his website. So let me show you guys his website, and this is what it looks like. Let me bring in me in the corner here. There I am. So here's what it looks like, his website, and he's got all the different types of visits. He's got the top 30, the pro day, and I don't know what other types of visits it might be. And he's broken it down here into all the different positions. And for those just listening on the audio side, I'll read you off the positions that have been most visited by prospects to the Minnesota Vikings. Defensive tackle is first. Offensive tackle, interestingly, is second. Running back after that, interior offensive line, wide receiver, then corner, and one linebacker and one edge rusher. Now, this is not weighted in any way for the caliber of prospect, right? So we're going to look at some of the names and see what we can see for potential first round picks or early second round picks. I do suspect that the offensive tackles, a lot of them are either guys who are going to eventually be guards or are maybe late round tackles that might be a development project for someday down the road, which they seem to like to take guys like Walter Rouse, but maybe more positional switches instead. So if we add it up, the offensive tackles and interior line, they would have more of those two positions than anything else, which I think tells a story that we would all agree with, that the offensive line is not completely set with that left guard position. So why don't we take a look at some of the players that the Vikings have brought in? So here is the list of 20 of them that they have brought in. Now, I would assume that Kent gets his information just by all the reporting that is out there. So there may be other players that they've met with. There are, in fact, very likely that there are other players that they've met with that are not on this list. But let's talk about a few of the names that stand out right away that the Vikings have had visit. And you could toy with this website yourself. It's just Kent's name, kentwayroush.com / draft visits is where I got this. So again, shout out to Kent for putting this together. This is very cool. Some of the names that stand out to me right away, Derek Harmon at the top here is, of course, the name that jumps out. This is somebody that we have had connected to the Minnesota Vikings really since the NFL Combine, because defensive tackle makes a lot of sense to me. I wrote about it today over at purpleinsider.football about why defensive tackle makes so much sense. And it's because nobody on the D line currently is locked in after 2 years. So Harrison Phillips, they can move on after this year, but it's a contract through 2026. Jonathan Allen is technically a 3-year deal, but it's much more like a 2-year deal. And Javon Hargrave is a 2-year deal. And these guys are on the older side. And when you look at the defensive tackles that are paid the most, and I even in the article broke it down into how many first rounders out of the top 25 highest paid guys are in that list. And it's 14 out of 25. So the top 25 highest paid DTs, 14 are first rounders, which is ridiculous. And there was only one guy, Grady Jarrett, who was even a 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick. And there was one undrafted free agent, Tershawn Wharton, who just got signed this offseason and maybe got overpaid a little to go to Carolina. So the point being that you draft a defensive tackle knowing that you got to get those guys in the first round if you want to get the elite players. Derek Harmon had the, I believe, second highest pass rush win rate in all of college football. I mean, this is a guy that you have to look really, really closely at. Not Now mentions that a lot are in the later rounds, and Blowfishes that there's a lot of local prospects, right? So that's why I want to look at the guys that don't fit that bill, that are not necessarily later round guys and not necessarily local prospects, but people that we've been talking about that they had in for visits. So another name that stands out is Jonah Salvanaya, I believe is how it's pronounced. The offensive tackle / guard from Arizona, somebody that could be very interesting to them in the 3rd round. He's gotten as high as 2nd round projections, big, giant tackle, but probably doesn't have quite the quickness to be a starter at offensive tackle. So he is a candidate to move in from guard. Siobhan Revell is another one, the cornerback. He is the only notable corner that they've brought in. And I imagine that they would bring in Revell because of the health concern. He tore his ACL. He missed a good percentage of his season with that torn ACL. And if it's somebody that you are considering has high-end potential like Revell does, but the guy has an injury, then you're going to be more apt to bring him in. Marcus Embo is another guy who, if I'm not mistaken, let me check on this. I believe played tackle, but is more of a guard. And they might want to meet with some of these guys. That's right. So he played tackle, right? He played guard 2 years ago and then moved to right tackle and was a pretty exceptional zone blocker, known as a good athlete for his position, but only about 300 pounds, not really strength wise a tackle. So likely to end up moving into play guard. And that's interesting that there's a couple of tackles here that project as guards. And that makes me wonder if they want to meet with those guys and just get a sense for how comfortable they would be playing guard, or, maybe they are potential targets. But that's kind of it for guys that are projected to go really high. There aren't any other players that I could spot here that have been picked as 1st or 2nd rounders. Ingram Dawkins is an interesting defensive tackle that they brought in. You could see maybe potential there. And then the other skill players. So actually, Carson Swessinger is another one that has been projected in the top 2 rounds. He is a linebacker. And I did want to talk about that a little bit tonight, about linebacker and Jahad Campbell and Carson Swessinger, because it's the one position that we haven't really discussed at all that I think could shock us. If there is a shocking outcome for the Vikings on the first night, it's probably picking a linebacker, and maybe it shouldn't be quite as shocking. So, again, if you're just joining, taking a look at uh, Kent Wayroush's tracking of the Vikings visits that they've had in and which top names that they have had. So Schlesinger and the linebacker position, something I did want to discuss because I really haven't even thought about that until I was looking at this list and went, wait a minute, that guy, UCLA linebacker, I think is getting a fair amount of hype. And then the other thing that stands out is just the skill position guys they brought in. Rashad Smith, a running back from SMU, can really catch the ball. He was moved from wide receiver to running back, so he could be a little bit of a dynamic player for them. Jordan James from Oregon had a really good season out there. Ty Felton, the wide receiver from Maryland, and Trayshawn Holden, another wide receiver that they brought in, was kind of interesting there. So you guys were asking about the list of players they brought in. Those are the ones that stood out to me. And I'm sure, when they look at someone like Ariante Ursay, that might just be because he's a Minnesota guy. Doesn't seem like there's a big chance that they would draft him and move him into guard, but maybe they have that discussion anyway because he is a first round caliber talent. So there you go. There's kind of the rundown of all the players that, or at least Kent has been able to track that they've brought in. As I mentioned, I'm sure that they have brought in a lot more players than that, and we just don't know about that yet. I'm sure that they have had 30 of them. But there you go. The only thing that really stands out is that linebacker because I just have not considered that at all. But I started to take a look the other day at Jihad Campbell and Schlesinger, and something that did come to mind for me is that maybe we have given Ivan Pace Jr. a little bit too much credit as an every down linebacker. Now, that doesn't mean I'm down on Ivan Pace Jr. because I think that he's gotten off to a tremendous start to his career. But there might be some limitations to Ivan Pace Jr. because of his size. So he's a fantastic blitzer, and he is, I think, good enough in coverage at times. Last year, he struggled. He had the interception 2 years ago against the Raiders. Last year's numbers weren't all that good. And against the run, he's very good. I mean, he is a missile coming downhill. But what we know about Brian Flores is that he loves these linebackers who could do a lot of things. And we saw the cross training of Dallas Turner last year. Now, Dallas Turner sort of projects as what Andrew Van Ginkel was doing. Jihad Campbell is much more of an inside linebacker type. He's more of a Blake Cashman than he is an Andrew Van Ginkel. I don't think he's as much of a pass rusher. He can do it, but it's not like he is a Micah Parsons or something. I don't see him like that. I see him as much more of a inside linebacker who can rush the passer when he's asked to, but is really dynamic playmaker. I mean, a Blake Cashman is kind of how I've looked at him, just looking at him on paper, watching a little bit of him today when I was thinking about linebackers and whether that would be something the Vikings could actually look at. Now, I think the other guy who's projected to be this similar, Walker, what is his name? Jalen Walker. What is it? Yeah, Jalen Walker. Well, you know what? He's actually on PFF's board, his average draft position is 18. He's another guy that I was looking at as could they just load up so many front seven types of players? And Walker is a guy that lined up as a linebacker, lined up as an edge rusher. And if one of those guys is there and is by far the best player on their board, that might be intriguing. That's the only scenario that I haven't really thought of at all. That after looking at Schlesinger, I was like, you know what? Maybe that's not insane to consider the linebackers as well. And I'll get you a little information on Schlesinger, but someone brought him up to me as an intriguing player that may get drafted higher than most people think. So average draft position by PFF for Schlesinger, Carson Schlesinger, is 55, but he might go higher than that. Great pass rushing grade, 90 pass rushing grade by PFF, graded well against the run and in coverage. It would seem just by their needs that the Vikings would not like if they did it, I think there'd be a lot of questions. Like, what are they doing? Do they not like Dallas Turner? Why would they take another linebacker? But when these positions for the Vikings rotate in and out so much and are used in so many different spots, and they also might not be planning on extending Andrew Van Ginkel because of the price. And even though Blake Cashman is incredibly valuable to this team, he does get banged up from time to time. They brought in Eric Wilson. I thought that was a very good signing, but more dynamic players who can do more things seems like just the ethos of Brian Flores. And if it's the best player, they may consider it. I would still put offensive line, safety, corner, DT, maybe not in that order, all over linebacker. But if there's one wild scenario where we all go, wait a minute, they drafted who? Then Jahad Campbell or Jalen Walker could be those guys. So there you go. On to your questions and your comments and your thoughts. Got any thoughts on who the Vikings have brought in for the visits? Whatever else is on your mind for tonight's chat. And then Clay is standing by with Clay's Corner for later on the show. So let me start with Jason brings up that the Vikings had a Michigan running back in today. I had that name. That is not Donovan Edwards. It was the other guy. Donovan Edwards kind of fell this year. He was obviously really high up after they won the national championship, but Kalel Mullings, I believe, was the guy they brought in, who is a beast. This guy, 6'2", 230 pounds, just a massive human being. Now, I did think about when they bring in a guy like that, and I was looking at his usage, and he was used much more in a gap scheme than he was in a zone scheme at Michigan, whether the Vikings are going to redo their running game. They brought in the guy from the Jets, the offensive line coach, to take the reins, it seems, on their running game. And you look at Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones, both of their histories would suggest zone. But at the same time, San Francisco does not do what they used to do when Kyle Shanahan first got there. When he first got there, they ran outside zone all day long, and that was very Shanahan Kubiak like. But I don't think that they do that as much. I can pull this up for Jordan Mason and see how much he ran both. I think that they did change to some extent with their offensive line to doing more gap stuff. But luckily, we have stats for all this stuff, and I never have to make up anything. No, you know what? Actually, Jordan Mason did run a lot more in zone than gap. 110 carries to 41. Interesting. Okay. So I guess what got me thinking about that was if the Vikings look at somebody like Tyler Booker, and he's such a hulking beast, but he's not super fast. And then you add him with Ryan Kelly, another big giant guy, and Will Fries, big giant guy. The tackles are built for running the zone and being more mobile and quick, but the interior would be really set up to run more gap stuff and power up the middle. But Jones and Mason have run more in their careers in the zone. Now, maybe they see Mason, he's so powerful as someone who can run in a gap scheme, and Aaron Jones can pretty much do whatever you ask him to do. I will be very curious to see if they get a left guard that gives us an indication of what they're going to be. I mean, if they take somebody like Marcus Embo, who's a tackle, and want to move him into guard, I mean, that could kind of tell us, well, maybe they're looking a little bit, or Salvanaya. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. That's a tackle who's enormous. Maybe they are thinking about just being a little more powerful on the inside. Evan says thoughts on the 464-pound defensive lineman Desmond Watson out of Florida. A 5'9", 340 at that size is insane and faster than me. Well, all these guys are faster than us, I would think. I don't know what I run as a 40. Cracking 6 might be kind of tough at this point. At one point in my life, I could crack 6 for sure, but I don't know. I have not done any sprinting in a very long time. I'm not into that. I just don't think you could be fast enough in the NFL to be 460 pounds. I think they'll just run around you. There have been some players before through the years who have been around 400 that I don't see being able to really survive. I mean, at one point, Pat Williams was probably up there at 350 plus. It's just so difficult, even if you're a great athlete, to play at that type of weight. There's a few offensive linemen who have been Daniel Falele, who was what? I mean, he was maybe 370 or something like that, absolutely enormous dude, and he's able to play in the NFL, but I don't know that you could be quick enough. It's such a quick and fast game. And if you're not, even no matter how heavy you are, if you're not the one throwing the first punch, then you're going to get pushed around no matter what. Cause these guys, they lift tractor trailers with their teeth in the off season. I mean, there's the strength on the inside is so much that I don't think they're going to struggle like college guys would against somebody that's that big. Maybe as an undrafted free agent, but I would not spend a draft pick on someone like that. Not when no one at that weight has ever made it in the NFL. Blowfishes says, does Sam Howell have any connection to Josh McCown? We all have a connection to Josh McCown, truly. It's the seven, what is it? 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something. I don't even know what that means, but the seven, what is it? How does it go? Degrees of separation from Josh McCown. I'm sure that all of us have some connection to him. You guys listening to the show, and I cover him on the team. But I have no idea. I just assume all backup quarterbacks know each other. That could be a potential option with Drew Lock going back to Seattle. I was really unimpressed by Sam Howell when he got his chance to play last year. He looked like he was totally unprepared. He was an interception machine when he was with Washington. I don't know. I'm not excited by that. I do believe that the Vikings have some targets for potential trades that they would not spend this year's draft capital on. It would be more like sending, I don't know, we'll give you this year's, whatever, give you 2026 fifth and get back your sixth. I mean, you're not giving up much if you're trading for somebody else's backup quarterback. And you guys know how I feel about that. I'm not too concerned about it. They'll get somebody. That somebody apparently is not going to be Drew Lock, but it could be Sam Howell. And if it is, then okay, sure, that's fine. Still thinking it's curious that Carson Wentz is on the market. Well, everybody who's exactly like Carson Wentz has already been signed. And the Vikings, I mean, sort of wink, wink, nod, nod on, yeah, we're going to sign somebody after the comp pick does not matter. And that just screams Carson Wentz to me. If it's not, okay, then they'll find somebody else to be their backup. Maybe that's Aiden O'Connell for the Raiders if they want to move on from him and he wants another chance. It's just somebody will be the backup. And the difference between the fifth best backup in the league and the 25th best backup in the league is basically nothing. There are probably 4 or 5 teams that could lose their starting quarterback and still have a chance to win a lot of games. But even when you're talking about Drew Lock or you're talking about Joe Flacco, I mean, Flacco kind of grinded his way on an amazing running team and defense team to the playoffs and got blasted. And Drew Lock played a couple of good games for Seattle and then bad games. And then last year, same sort of roller coaster, 500 type quarterback. There are 15 backup quarterbacks in the league who could keep you at 500 for a handful of games. And you want one of those. If they get Wentz, he's one of those. And after that, it is pretty bleak. I will say it is pretty bleak, the list of available backup quarterbacks after that. But as you mentioned with Sam Howell, somebody will lose a backup quarterback competition somewhere. That was Nick Mullins. That's how they got him. And Nick Mullins at least made things very entertaining at the end of 2023. That's for sure. Aaron says, what is your favorite draft story with the Vikings after the draft interviews stories? That's a good question. I think maybe the most wrong and shocked that we were, or maybe not wrong, but yeah, no, wrong is the correct word. In 2018, the Vikings were 100% locked to take an offensive lineman in the first round. I mean, I don't know that I mocked anybody else at any other position in 2018 other than offensive line to the Vikings. Every mock everywhere the whole time was Vikings taking offensive line because you remember Joe Berger retired and they had Mike Remmers at tackle. It just was not looking all that sharp. And I think it was maybe later that Nick Easton got hurt, but Nick Easton was still a guy that you could replace on the offensive line. So we were shocked when they called for Mike Hughes and his name went out because we were like, wait a minute, Mike Hughes, how the heck are they not drafting an offensive lineman right here? Are they out of their minds? Like, this is win now. They just got Kirk Cousins. They need someone to come in right away. Why is Mike Zimmer so obsessed with these freaking corners? Is he a crazy person? And I remember going nuts the next day on the radio and just blasting them. What are they doing? And so the next day, they take Brian O'Neill. And when we all look up Brian O'Neill, who I believe I had mocked to the Vikings in the first round. So I was like, oh, they got him in the second. But you looked at the guy and you watched him on tape and you go, what is this, a tight end? I mean, this must be the smallest tackle I have ever seen in terms of girth. I mean, he's not small in terms of height. And once again, we were like, a converted tackle. What are you doing? Why are you, I'm sorry, not tackle, tight, a converted tight end. What are you doing drafting this converted tight end? He's got to develop for 2 years. He's not even going to play. Are you out of your minds? This is win now. Of course, I mean, Mike Hughes had the injury. I think he would have become a pretty good player. He's still in the league and still plays, but Brian O'Neill became maybe the one of the best second round draft pick offensive linemen of the last 10 years and has become a Pro Bowl star for them, captain. He's everything you could dream of with that pick. He even played in 2018 and he played well in 2018. And, so I guess that's just goes for the reactions on draft night are not always going to be reflective of what happens for the rest of that player's career, because couldn't have been more off about how quickly Brian O'Neill was going to play. And the thing that you just don't know is when Brian O'Neill got to the Vikings, I mean, he put on a bunch of weight, put in the work, came back for training camp ready to go. And we were impressed. Like, wow. He still didn't start a whole lot in his first training camp because they were playing Rashad Hill, but him making that jump, not everybody's willing to do what it takes to be great. And Brian O'Neill was. And then I remember his first start and how shocked he looked after going in to that tie game against Green Bay. And I talked to him in the locker room after that. And I've sort of joked with him since then about how shocked he looked. Like, I just got in the football game. It was crazy. But, a guy who stepped in right away. The other one is probably, and none of these stories are necessarily mind blowing, but in 2020, the Vikings had traded Diggs. And my big take on that was, man, you better trade for a receiver. You better get somebody else because you are just not getting the top receivers in this draft. It was supposed to be thought of as this unbelievable wide receiver draft. The guys were supposed to go off early. And I remember being asked the day of the draft by a listener, well, what if Justin Jefferson drops? And I was like, what are you, taking drugs? There is no way that this league lets Justin Jefferson drop. This guy just led NCAA in receiving. He has a 98 percentile relative athletic score. Like, he's a freak. What are you talking about? No chance. And I've never been so shocked in my life. And the video of Zimmer and Spielman cackling when they get Justin Jefferson is pretty good. It's a pretty good moment for the franchise. So stuff like that kind of sticks out. I wish I was covering the team. I'm writing today about rewatching the Kevin Williams draft where they don't pick and they had the number 7 pick and they don't pick till 11 or was it 11 or 9? Maybe it's 9. Must have been 9. Yeah. So they don't pick until 9. And I was watching that back today. It's just, I wish I was there for that one because that was pure chaos, calamity. And the funniest part is that they had a camera at Eden Prairie at Winter Park. So they go, Byron Leftwich is getting drafted and Chris Berman's losing his mind. The Vikings didn't pick. They didn't make a pick. What are they doing? Are they crazy? So they show Eden Prairie when Kevin Williams is picked and a guy throws his hat. He's so angry. He takes his hat off and throws it right on TV, right on ESPN. It was so ticked off. And once again, there were 2 or 3 defensive tackles taken ahead of Kevin Williams that became nothing in the league. There was a guy named Jonathan Sullivan, just nothing, just became nothing. Dwayne Robertson, you never even heard of these guys that were taken ahead of Kevin Williams. He becomes a 6-time All-Pro. freak, huge part of great defense. Like that's the draft, right? You just can't predict it. That's what makes it so great. That's what I was talking earlier. It's like Christmas Day. I don't want to know. I want to find out what's going to happen that night because that was really something. And probably my all-time favorite moment with the draft is when I was not an adult yet and I didn't have cable growing up, so I couldn't watch the draft. It was on ESPN. So I listened to it on the radio. And I was listening to the 98 draft as they were going through, and the guys on the radio were just trashing Randy Moss. And they're talking about, well, he showed up here with his leg sleeve pulled up or whatever, and he doesn't care, and this is why he's dropping in the draft. All this stuff. They were just hammering this guy, bad character, all this. I was like, man, screw these guys. I hope this Moss guy becomes the best freaking receiver in the league. And I knew nothing about him. I didn't see Marshall highlights or anything like that. I just thought, what is it? What difference does it make what he's doing with his genes? And so I was like, I'm going to follow this guy's career. And well, here I am. And I've been at a Randy Moss press conference a couple of times and talked with, him a little bit. So that's kind of cool. But that was one of those. I was like 12 and I'm like, I want to have takes. I want to have sports takes. I want to argue with people. I want to go on and argue with these guys. What are you guys talking about? The guy's a great receiver. So here we go. Anyway, there you go. Blowfishes says KOC will have time with all the solid QB options because he learned from Belichick in New England that you get info on players who might be available later in their career. Yeah, no, that's the reason why O'Connell goes to the combine every year is that he wants to meet with them, wants to get to know those guys. And we've seen him bring in multiple players that he's built relationships with, including Daniel Jones, even Josh Rosen. He brought him in very briefly. But I mean, I just think as far as the backup quarterback, you can take your time and not blow a comp pick if you're going to spend some serious cheese on somebody because it's just not that big of a deal who the backup quarterback is. The quarterback is JJ McCarthy. And if something happens to McCarthy, you're in a lot of trouble, just like in 2003. And that's why I remember 2023. And I remember having this discussion every offseason with, well, they drafted Jaron Hall. Is he going to beat out Nick Mullins in camp? And I was like, I don't care what happens. I mean, not unless the guy looks like Drew Brees or something. And alas, they end up with Josh Dobbs, Mullins, Hall, and they miss the playoffs. If your quarterback gets hurt, you're probably not making the playoffs. And you're hoping to be able to survive. So that's why I don't worry too much about it. They'll get somebody. I know they'll get somebody. I'm sure of it. Christian says, should the Vikings just focus on the trenches this year and next year try to get Notre Dame's running back, Jay Love? I don't know his name. But well, I think that it's a good strategy in general to take a running back late. So if it's Brashad Smith, is that his name? Yeah. Brashad Smith or Jordan James, a couple of the guys that they've had in. I mean, we see this happen enough where mid to late round guys at running back end up being good. And in this year's draft, my goodness, I mean, you look at James from Oregon, look at his numbers, you go, wait, this guy's supposed to go in the 5th, 6th, 7th? Really? That's crazy. And Smith was really good too. Jarquez Hunter caught my eye with a guy who averaged over 6 yards a carry. There's 10 running backs that are projected in the 5th that might have been projected in the 3rd in previous years if there wasn't so many good ones. And the last time that we heard this about a running back draft, it actually turned out to be true. That was the Dalvin Cook year. And Aaron Jones ends up going in the 5th. Alvin Kamara ends up going in the 3rd. I feel like it's going to be the same way with this year's draft where you go, yeah, okay, but take a swing. I mean, I don't think that's a bad strategy when you have Jones, who's on either last or second to last year. We'll see how Jordan Mason plays. But that's another thing too. I'd rather see kind of how this plays out with Jordan Mason as a main part of their team and then bring in one other guy because it just feels like the Ty Chandler thing is over after last year. When you go from running for 400 something yards and 100 carries to barely seeing the football at all, even when your team needs you on the field. Even when Aaron Jones is struggling or with some injury and battling through and could probably use a week off, they're like, nah, let's go get Cam Akers instead and have him mix and match. And I respect the heck out of Cam Akers and his toughness, and he's a good running back, but like that's what you're doing instead of the guy who was battling in training camp for RB2. And even last year, when you go back and look at some of the fantasy writing on the running back position, a lot of fantasy people thought that Chandler was going to be maybe RB1 if Aaron Jones showed some signs of aging, and it just did not come to fruition. So I think they're looking for another project guy. And you're right that next year, if they feel like they really need one, then they would do that. Edwin says Zabel at 24, Damian Martinez at 97. I'm thinking make it as easy as possible for McCarthy. Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike your strategy at all. The only thing is Damian Martinez at 97 might be a little bit rich for me to spend a running back at 97. I would rather do it when you already have two guys that are going to be on the field. The thing about the running back position is one of my favorite articles, I reference it all the time, is the one from Timo Risky at PFF, where he looked at the development curve for each position and how long it takes for somebody to become good. The least productive position is actually edge rusher as rookies. So maybe that tells you about some patience for Dallas Turner. And you could see why. I mean, the adjustment is so enormous from college to the NFL at edge rusher. The other worst position is usually offensive line, but the running back position is almost nothing at all. I mean, it's just, I mean, they come in and they play and they're great right away. So you draft one when you need one for running back. So I wouldn't spend a 97 on that position. I would probably, if you're going Zabel, I would probably go with maybe a safety or a cornerback. There could be some good corners that drop. Mama says, thoughts on Rory winning the Masters? Well, I loved it just as much as everybody else. I mean, I've followed Rory's career like any golf fan for a very long time and always came across to me, and we don't know these people, but always came across to me like the most genuine person. There's a ton of YouTube videos of him teaching golf and stuff that I like to watch. And you saw it yesterday, I felt that the genuineness of his emotion and how much it meant to him really shined, and what a day. But my favorite part, and thank you for asking, is that my former intern, Paul Hodowanik, was walking there covering Rory for PGAtour.com. And his article is walking with Rory in the round. So go to PGAtour.com and read Paul's article. It's awesome of him with Rory. I mean, how cool is that? Him at Augusta getting a chance to walk behind for this historic all-time great moment. Golf means different things to different people. For me, I love playing golf, but as far as like watching it, I've been the most basic guy. I take a Saturday nap in the middle of the day in a major, and then I kind of, hey, is Tiger playing? Like I'm that guy. And it's sort of been the same thing for Rory, where it's like, hey, he seems like, I mean, he's a great golfer. I love to see him hit the ball, and he seems like a genuine enough guy. And emotion pouring out like that is just, that's why we watch this stuff, whether it's golf or basketball or whatever it is how much it means to the people playing. That's why it's so incredible to cover playoff football games. And I have done this in my career, believe it or not, where your team wins that you're covering, because the outpouring of emotion after a playoff win, there's nothing like it in that locker room. It really isn't. And that's why we all do this, right? Because sports, it means something. So to see it mean so much to somebody who fought so hard, it was great. Sean says Walker seems like an Anthony Barr clone to me. I could buy into that. He is an exceptional rusher who's played inside and outside. And that's why I can't really rule out entirely the potential for the Vikings to take a look at him and Jahad Campbell. Now, I think Walker's a really good player and he'll probably get taken earlier, but both of these guys, I mean, these are the types that make Brian Flores' defense what it is, which is these versatile players inside, outside. I mean, I think about them almost like I've always kind of rejected the let's call it a 3-4 defense, because how often are they in a 3-4 where it's 4 linebackers, 3 D linemen? It's usually in some kind of nickel. And the nickel guy these days is Josh Metellus. But if you called Metellus a linebacker, it kind of is an old school 3-4. So you can move these guys around, blitz them from different spots, always have 4 rushing, but they never know where the 4 are coming from. And if you have somebody who can drop back in coverage really effectively and blitz, you got to be interested. And I don't mean to be down at all on Ivan Pace Jr. I'm not. I think he's had 2 really excellent years. But when you look at him and Blake Cashman, they've been banged up at times. And if you were bringing in somebody else to be more physically, freakishly gifted, to give you some other weapon that you can rotate in for 600 snaps and then have Pace be a rotational player, that might just add a level of freakishness that makes your defense even more nasty. Zach says, who's on the bench if you draft a safety in the first round? Well, right now, I want Josh Metellus playing the same role as he's been playing. And what you'd be doing is just replacing Cam Bynum and not starting Theo Jackson, which I've been as high on Theo Jackson. You could go back to training camp and you can read about my article calling him one of the 4 horsemen of the safety group, which Lewis Cine was kind of left out of that conversation. But, the 4 horsemen is what Durante Jones, their defensive backs coach, called them to me when I was interviewing him about Theo Jackson. And he said, he's the first guy in. They sit up front in the film room and they all understand the game at a high level. And Theo's part of that. And every time he gets in the game, he makes plays. So I like Theo Jackson a ton. At the same time, if you have an opportunity to draft Malachi Starks or Nick Emenware, you might just have to do it. I mean, Harrison Smith has probably got 1 year left. And if Harrison Smith plays 1 more year, even if you didn't even play Starks or Emenware, which of course you should, but that still leaves Theo Jackson under contract for the next couple years, and he could eventually slot in there. But you're looking for someone who could be short-term really impactful next year, which a safety is another position, by the way, that has a very short development curve. So safeties often step in and play well right away. And Brian Flores saw that from Javon Holland when he was in Miami. Star instantly with Brian Flores. So Starks, steps in, he plays with Harrison Smith. Theo Jackson rotates in, waits his turn, plays if somebody gets hurt. And then next year, Starks slides over or Emenware slides over into the Harrison Smith role. And then you could, kind of carry on having a really dangerous position there at safety, even after Harrison Smith retires. So it would be Theo Jackson, but I'm not that concerned if that happens. I mean, Theo is a special teamer, great fill-in player, but it's not like he's so good that you just can't keep him off the bench. He's a nice player and he's coming along and I'm impressed, but I wouldn't say, well, hey, don't draft this first round fantastic prospect because you have him. Ron says, I don't rule out wide receiver if someone slides. I know I saw my friend Steve Palazzolo from the Check the Mike podcast, formerly PFF. He was going Emeka Egbuka for the Vikings in his mock. And I tipped my cap to that I am not the only person in the entire world who is thinking, hey, draft a wide receiver, do everything you can for JJ McCarthy, get another playmaker, and then a year or 2 down the road when you got to pay Jordan Addison, instead of giving him $30 million, you just don't. And you have Egbuka step in. But I don't think that everybody's on board with me, including maybe Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. But if they draft a wide receiver, myself and Steve will at least be the 2 guys who have pounded the table for that. I just think that you don't get wide receivers in free agency. You have to draft them. And they do have a little bit of a development curve. So you can play a guy in a rotational role. I'll keep throwing this stat out there. In 2022, KJ Osborne, wide receiver 3, had 90 targets. 90 targets. That's valuable. That's a path onto the field. And I don't think that Jalen Naylor or Rondell Moore or anybody else keeps them from drafting someone who's really talented. So I'm into it. I'm into it. Uh, Placid Ataxia. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Is it possible they think Brett Rippon is the number two? Yeah, it's possible. I think that O'Connell had mentioned at some point last year that he was extremely impressed with Brett. Now, he's mentioned Brett Rippon 50 times, but he was impressed with him in practice specifically, which always perks my ear a little bit. Like, oh, I mean, because practice matters to these guys in their evaluation process. And we don't see Brett Rippon getting to play. And he has played before in the NFL. He has had games before where he's done well in the NFL before. So at least there is some experience there. I still think, as of right now, it feels like Carson Wentz is coming here. I don't know that. That's not a report. Just kind of, there's one guy left. Most teams have their backups. He doesn't have a chair. Kind of makes a lot of sense. But whether it's him, or whether it's somebody else, it's fine. Evan says, liking, sticking, and picking Malachi Starks the more and more after watching your podcast. Everything I hear about Malachi Starks is that the folks inside the league really love Malachi Starks. That he is looked at as somebody who can be an impact player, versatile, high IQ, plays the run extremely well. You could put him in the box. He moves well enough to guard somebody out of the slot if you need him. I just hear a lot of good things about Malachi Starks, and if he gets to 24, he could be the guy. But Emin still is a freakish type of player with his size and speed that they might see as an ability to develop him. I like when I hear what I hear about Malachi Starks more than Emin, if that makes sense. Like having read draft analysis now for how many years, trying to figure out who's going to be good. When I hear high IQ, super smart player, super instinctual, all those things, that kind of sets off little fireworks like, oh, okay. That tends to translate better to the NFL than just athletic freakishness. Now, I have no idea who's going to be better, but if you're giving me my choice of the two today, I'd probably go Starks, because I just think you lean toward, in a Flores defense, the smarts are probably the thing that's going to shine through. Sid's Ghost says, did you see the Todd McShay mock draft where he has the Giants trading up with the Vikings to take Jalen Milroe, and we take Benjamin Morris, I assume Morrison, the Notre Dame corner at 34. Yeah, I saw today that the Giants are bringing in Shedeur Sanders for another workout. That is reminiscent of the Atlanta last second workout with Michael Penix. Does that mean that they're desperate and they're going to draft Shedeur Sanders, or does their front office not really like him? And the ownership said, can you just take one more look just for me? Because we really need a quarterback. I think the Giants would be nuts to draft a quarterback when they're trying to save their bacon. And when you can draft a Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, they can actually help you right away. Somebody of that level of talent. Drafting a quarterback is just drafting it for the next regime, I think, for the Giants. But to your point, Jalen Milroe is a fascinating player to talk about, because I look at him like a 4th round pick. He's a crazy athlete, but I mean, if you watch some of the worst games that he played, I don't think he sees the field at all and just sort of chucks it. And he has enough arm strength to push it down the field. And I'd love him in the old Brad Smith role or something where he plays special teams and is a receiver and occasionally he's a quarterback. That would be fun. He could be the next Slash. I mean it. I think that's a cool thing to be in the NFL. He could be Cordell Stewart. He could be Brad Smith. But as a quarterback that you're going to start, probably not. As far as Benjamin Morrison goes, he's got that hip thing that I don't think any of us really knows how that's going to work out or not, with the hip injury for Morrison. But when I read, I'm always reading now these draft profiles and guys, athletic scores from the combine, trying to think, what would Brian Flores do? WWBFD. What would Brian Flores do? Just make it, what would Flores do? It's probably easier. And one of the things that I notice is the Vikings don't really care about the speed of their corners. they are not necessarily looking for. Now, they could draft Maxwell Hairston and totally change this uh, in general, but mostly, I mean, you look at their corners last year and they did really well. It's got to be the slowest cornerback group in the league last year. I mean, Gilmore, Griffin, and even Byron Murphy, I think ran a 4.5 something, 4.55, 4.57 at the combine. I mean, he's not the fastest, but it's really instincts, some toughness elements, some smarts, some playmaking on the football. And Morrison fits a lot of those bills. So he's somebody that I've had my eye on. That's why I've brought up Trey Amos as a corner. I think he's intriguing. One of the other guys that we haven't talked about a lot is Will Johnson. And I think Will Johnson from Michigan has a real chance to drop. I was looking at last year and where the cornerbacks were projected and where they were actually picked. And one thing I noticed was that Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold were top 15 projected, and they both went in the 20s. And that kind of sounds like Will Johnson, not the fastest. He's afraid to run his 40, but playmaking, interceptions, high IQ. There's a little bit of concern of whether he dogged it last year a little bit, but I mean, a super talented corner. Don't overthink it. He might be the guy that drops. And if he does, then you heard it here first. But I mean, I was just thinking like corners are a position that the NFL has let slip a little bit. How about Joey Porter Jr. a couple years ago? Again, another guy that was a top 15 projection that did not end up going that high. And I think he was the early part of the second round. So we could see that from someone like Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron is another one. Anthony says, I thought they liked Redmond, LDR, and Tyamani. I understand D-line is older and only on contracts for 2 years, but these guys could develop into something behind these vets. I agree that they could develop into something, but this is a position that historically, and look, John Randall, who I saw at the owners' meetings in Florida, John Randall is an example that blows this out of the water. So the Vikings, one of their best DTs ever, is not the first round draft pick. But normally, and that's where that stat comes from, about 14 of the top 25 and 23. So how about this? 23 out of the top 25 players that are the highest paid in the NFL are drafted in the first 3 rounds. I think that really tells you something. Now, yes, most positions, first rounders get the most money. I know that. But it's extreme when it comes to defensive tackle. And the reason is because it's usually a physical thing. The freaks get taken in the first round. The Kenneth Grants get taken. The Derek Harmons, the guys who put up crazy college numbers, they dominate, they're monsters. And those guys that you're talking about, I think are nice rotational players. Drake Rodriguez, Levi Drake Rodriguez might have a little bit higher of a ceiling because his origin story is so random. Coming from Texas A&M Financial District College or something. And I'm sorry, Levi, that's unfair, but I don't remember the name of it. And so he comes in the league like a 7th round draft pick. He might develop, but all those guys to me are rotational filler type of players. And someone like Harmon or Kenneth Grant, those are game changing freaks. And you can always rotate them in. So let's say one of those 3 guys becomes good and develops into a good rotational player, a Tom Johnson type. Okay, that's great. Or a Shamar Stephen, that's great. But Linval Joseph is the guy that changes your life in there, right? That's what you'd be looking for by drafting him at the top. And that's where, I think Javon Hargrave was a 3rd rounder or a 2nd, and Jonathan Allen's a 1st rounder. Like that's kind of where they come from. Let's see. Similar question about McVay's mock, but do I think the Vikings are sitting pretty well to trade their pick? So that in that mock, it really is the only scenario where the Vikings could do this, which is somebody wants a quarterback. Because otherwise, when it comes to the other positions, there's kind of a lot of the guys at each position that are similar. So there's Derek Harmon, but there's also Walter Nolan, and there's also Darius Alexander, and there's also TJ Sanders, and there's like a lot of guys at different positions. So who's actually making that move from the 2nd round up unless they want to pick a quarterback? I think that is the one scenario where you could lock it in that they can move down. Otherwise, I find it a little bit difficult for them to actually trade back too far. And I don't mind if they stick and pick in the first round. Rob says 100% the draft visits count. They had visits with Addison, Jefferson, and Turner. They also had another 3 or 4 players from those visits. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I kind of think that's a really small sample size to say that they're always going to draft off of that list of visits. Maybe it points us in the direction, or maybe this year they don't draft the guy that they had in for a visit. It's like hard to figure out. I mean, out of that list, Derek Harmon is the one that stands out the most because that's a first round pick. Siobhan Ravel would be the other one. Aside from the list that they've had in, at least that we know about publicly, there aren't a lot of other guys that are projected to be first round picks. Ravel is absolutely interesting to me. And Harmon, we were just talking about. Um, Aside from that, though, there's only a couple of guys there. So are they just drafting those two? Or are there other guys they've had in for visits that we don't know about? It's not like they have to put the list out there. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it means, but it's interesting to talk about. More interesting than I gave it credit for the other day. How about that? Let's see. I shot you 99 says, I don't think Mike Hughes' position was bad. Pretty sure we needed a cornerback badly that year. Did we not? No, not right away. Not that year because they still had Rhodes, Wayans, and Mackenzie Alexander. And I mean, that was most of what they had taken to the NFC Championship. Terrence Newman was cut, which was, it was a bad decision. They cut Newman and B-Rob that year. And I still don't understand that. I still don't understand. I know that both of those guys were ramping it up a little bit slowly and B-Rob had been banged up, but that never made a bit of sense to me why they did that to keep Tashawn Bauer and I don't know, Holton Hill or something, somebody random at the cornerback. I think it was Holton Hill. I'll never understand that in a win now type of season to take 2 of your biggest veteran leaders and jettison them at the end of training camp was just goofy, straight up goofy. But so they, after losing Terrence Newman, yes, they kind of needed a corner, but not exactly. Hughes wasn't going to play right away. My logic then was, well, they've got these positions filled for right now with players who aren't old. Um, Rhodes wasn't old. Waynes wasn't old. Mackenzie Alexander, it seemed, had proven to them that he could play. That was true in 2019. And, he didn't turn out to be that great, but I didn't think he was bad for either of those 2 years. But I didn't have corner on my radar because I felt like the 3 starting spots were filled. And then when they went with it, it was like, huh? But I guess they could have been looking a year down the road and saying, well, Trey Waynes, we're not going to pay him and he's going to leave. And I think Alexander was a free agent too after 2019. That might have been part of their logic, or they just thought you always draft a corner because you should always draft a corner. And I always felt really bad for Mike Hughes in the way that it played out with his injuries, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, he felt like, and I'm only speaking from things that he said, I got the impression he felt like it wasn't handled the best with his injury. And that's just an impression. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. It was just the feeling I got was that he felt like it wasn't handled the best. And maybe there were times where he was put back out there too soon or something like that. And it just took a long time for his career to get back on track. But I think he was a good player. I think he would have been a good player. So it turned out, I mean, they picked 2 good players. That's why I remember that so much is the reaction. We were all, what are they doing? And it ended up working out really good for them. Oh no, all the guards are coming off the board and most of the guards became nothing. That was the Will Hernandez obsession draft, which is still continued to exist to this day. Let's go to Brett here. Brett says, with all the Rodgers and free agent talk, we haven't talked about the kicker at all. That's true, Brett. We haven't talked about the kicker at all. Do you think Will Reichard will be able to get out of his slump that he was in at the end of the season? Yeah, I think he'll be fine. I mean, Will Reichard is incredibly, incredibly talented. The only thing that worried me about last year was not that he got injured. It was that he didn't tell anybody he got injured. He talked to Mark Craig after the game where he missed a couple field goals and got hurt and told him that he'd been dealing with something throughout the week. And then when we asked Matt Daniels about it, he said, yeah, he didn't tell me that. That's concerning because he's had a history of some injuries. And if he's going to hide them, then he might be dealing with something. I think this happened with Dan Bailey too. I don't think you can kick with an injury. I've never tried it, but I don't think that it's wise to try to be booting 60-yard field goals when you've got some sort of leg problem. That was what concerned me. But as far as his talent goes, his nerve, I mean, I think that he should be fine. But you get a neck roll for asking about the kicker at this point. That is the first time I think anybody has asked about the kicker. Let's see. Not Now says back to the the '03 draft. Some say that Red McCombs made them wait. That was something that was talked about a lot on the broadcast as I was watching it back. Is they were like, did they do this on purpose to try to save money because they thought they could get Kevin Williams anyway? They might have. It might have been a draft hack. I don't know. They got a 6-time All Pro. It just tells you how random the draft can be because they looked like such goofs at that moment. Like, what is this team doing? Are they out of their mind? They missed 2 draft picks and then they get unbelievable prospect who becomes one of the best players at his position in NFL history and belongs in the Hall of Fame, by the way. 6 All Pros. There's very few guys who aren't in the Hall of Fame with 6 All Pros. Sue says, what would make the 2025 draft a Christmas gift for us? I think the best players, well, you know what it would for me. If they drafted the wide receiver, that would do it for me. Then it'd be like, all right, Christmas on Purple Insider. They actually did the receiver thing. I don't think it's likely. So other than that, I would say just the players that I think are the best could be totally different from the players that they think are the best. But Derek Harmon and Malachi Starks, Gray Zabel, I have maybe in that ballpark, maybe not quite as high as those two. I think if they got Harmon or Starks, those are instant, very, very good contributors, if not guys with ceilings that could be Pro Bowlers. And it's hard to get at 24, but at those positions, that could be a thing for them. Those are the 2 guys that I think you run in the pick, you celebrate, maybe more than anyone else. But I'd be curious about some of your other answers. Derek says, might read into the Jacob Bayer visit as a potential late rounder, held his own pretty well. One-on-ones in the Senior Bowl, set a pretty good baseline in pass pro. I think they're always looking for guys to develop for offensive linemen. Derek also likes Savania. Yep, me too. Me too. Tackles converting into guard. I don't always love it because of the Ezra Cleveland thing. And what I've talked about a lot is, hey, if you got this 6th round tackle and you're trying to make him a guard, it's a pretty tough transition for those guys because they were already a 6th round tackle. But Savania is somebody who is projected as a top 3 round player, physical beast. Moving him inside would be pretty good, I think. There's a lot of options potentially. Aaron says they met with Cam Ward at the combine too. KOC doesn't leave a rock unturned. Oh, he's going to talk to every quarterback. He wants to know every single quarterback in the world. I mean, just because, hey, you never know. You never know when that guy could be a free agent down the road or whatever, and you've got a relationship with him. Skywalking McCarthy says, on Malachi Starks, the Vikings brought in Ben Urasek, the guy who guarded Starks in practice. Well, now that's a neck roll for you, my friend. That now you're deep into it. Now you are fully into gumshoe mode of like looking into Sherlock Draft Holmes is what you are when you're looking into the guy that guarded him in practice. That's good. I like that. See, I've never gotten that deep into it like that. Derek wants CJ West at 97. Sure, I like that. Good run stopper. Not necessarily a pass rusher I'm looking for there. David says, I do think we are moving back, if not twice, from the 1st to the 2nd round. We will end up with 7 picks or more in this draft. And the next will be a lot of youth replenishment in maximizing value. That's absolutely possible. I think the farther you move back in any draft, the lower your odds are of getting difference-making players. And that's where I wonder about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. If he has changed his theory from when he first got here. Because the last two drafts, they have stayed at their spot or moved up because they wanted to get game changers. They wanted to get guys who could be superstars like Jordan Addison and Dallas Turner, not guys who can just be, okay in the second round, maybe a potential star here or there. But if you look at the difference between the middle of the second, early second, and the late first, there's a lot of busts in the late first, but there's also a lot of guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Christian Darrisaw, who have turned out to be great. And they might be looking at it that way, but you could be right. I mean, depends on how important it is for them to stack up picks. They also might say, look, we're in a mode now where we're not really looking for, let's fill out this position or that position with a fifth rounder. Let's just try to get the best possible star player that we can get. We're going to find out because I'm curious which way that goes. Trading down makes a lot of sense in this draft. I did it once in a draft sim. I traded down to 54 and I was still happy. I traded down twice all the way into the 50 and I still got a guy that I thought, this guy could fit the Vikings pretty well. It's a weird draft that way, but still the history is what it is. The 24th pick is a lot better than the 34th and the 44th. That's just the facts. So we'll see. CJ, about a month away from the schedule reveal. Ooh, thinking about the schedule reveal already. Somebody's trying to get a neck roll. Without knowing the dates, what away games are you looking forward to most? I think I think that Pittsburgh is one that I hope they don't move to Ireland because I would love to go to Pittsburgh. When I lived in Buffalo, I went to Pittsburgh all the time. All the time. So amazing, beautiful city. If you've never been, it's great. And I used to go to Jerome Bettis's restaurant, which is right near the stadium. And I had Jerome Bettis on a radio show, and I told him how much I loved his restaurant. So I love Pittsburgh. The hills, all the houses built in. You could take that thing up the hills and the crazy bridges. It's a beautiful city. I'd love to go there. Where I'd really love to go there is like December. Pittsburgh, December, some snow in the air, something like let's get football here, right? I'd love that. That one's on my mind the most. I don't know if there's another one that is as unique as that. I'm not excited about going to Cleveland. I'm not even sure I'm going to do that trip, depending on where they're at. I kind of mix and match in the middle of the season sometimes on road trips. Like last year, I tried to go to almost every one of them because of how the season was going, but Cleveland might not do it. I don't know. Pittsburgh definitely stands out. I think the Vikings haven't played there since 2017. The game where Ryan Quigley threw a punt. That was the game where Case Keenum was so bad. We're like, can they get another quarterback? Nobody knows nothing. Dusty says Ravel first, and then even Jordan Phillips from Maryland. Very strong guy, Jordan Phillips on the interior, might have some potential. Or Caldwell from Oregon in the third. That's more of a nose tackle-y type of guy. They could go with that. Somebody to pair with Harrison Phillips, get him off the field sometimes. David says, I like that. If they picked Ravel and Phillips, I'd be fine with it. Probably like to mix in a guard there. David says, I also think defensive secondary has to be their first and second priorities. I mentioned that before. Free agency have to have two high functioning, versatile safeties so that Metellus. Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all, David. If they were to draft Malachi Starks or Nick Emenware, or Derek brings up Kevin Winston, somebody else at safety, this defense does require a lot of the safeties. And are you okay with throwing in Theo Jackson when he's never really done it for a long period of time before? You're almost in a mode right now where you don't want to be doing that too much. They did that with Blake Brandel last year where it's, hey, we kind of like this development guy. Let's see if he can play 17 games. And the answer was not really. Kind of, but not really. It wasn't horrendous, but it wasn't great either. If you can have that replaced, so uncertainty replaced with super high ceiling for talent, I would be willing to do that. And I don't disagree that it is important to stack up the secondary. That was the only area a little bit in the cornerbacks where they got beat sometimes last year. Tate Ratledge at 97. Good athlete. Really crushed the combine. Let's see. Now, Gazinkad, you're trolling me with let the fans know if we let Addison go in free agency, they might get a comp pick. Yeah, that's right. Then everybody will be on board with my draft a receiver. Like, wait a minute, we'll get a comp pick in 4 years if we let Addison go in free agency. That's funny. That's funny. Rob says trading back for a late third or fourth if they could get it. It really all depends on like who is interested. That was the thing about the Lewis Cine trade back is the team trading up for Jameson Williams went up 20 spots. They didn't give up a first. We all know that. But who else was interested in making a trade up? And for what? That's at 24, someone's got to be interested in making that trade up. So who is the player that's going to be there that someone else is trading up that they're giving you a third or a fourth round pick for? That means that they're not going up that far either. And I'd be good with that if the Vikings go from 24 to 29 or 30. Okay, well, that's good. But that's not leaving that space where you still can get star players. That's going back to 40, 45. That's too far for me. But how much can you really get for a short move up that maybe someone's doing for a defensive tackle? Maybe you should just take your guy. Aaron, Jade Barron, another high IQ player. Don't think he'll be there at 24. Yeah. I just think it's very possible that the corners drop a little bit more than we think. That they're just historically over the last few years, there's been a lot of corners that are projected in a certain area and they end up going lower than they're expected. Mama says, is the hype for Jackson Dart valid? I really don't know. Because when we look at talk about history, the recent history of the quarterbacks in the draft, Will Levis, projected top 5. Malik Willis, first rounder, guaranteed. There's been a lot of these. Daniel Jones, that's a second round pick. Michael Penix, that's a second round pick. Bo Nix, second round pick. Those guys go in the first. It's probably the position that draft analysts have been the farthest off and the most mystery and the most misdirection from teams about in the draft process. I don't think that the Jackson Dart hype is valid. I also know that the Pittsburgh Steelers drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round, and he really didn't have a great skill. He was supposed to be accurate, a good leader, that kind of thing. There was nothing really there. Jordan Addison is the one that pumped up his statistics, but they were willing to take him anyway. So maybe one team gets crazy. I don't see it. Sanders even is a hard sell to me to make a franchise quarterback. Maybe the Saints are that desperate. Maybe the Giants are that desperate, but it's really hard to squint and go, does that look like the quarterbacks who have really emerged as superstars lately? Only if it's Brock Purdy with San Francisco. And Purdy's a better playmaker. I'm sure he's faster than Shedeur Sanders, definitely quicker and way more of a playmaker. Accurate, really good leader. But also dropped into a spot with the best tight end in the league, the best running back in the league, the best left tackle in the league, 2 top-notch wide receivers. And that's what it took for Brock Purdy to have that season. Well, anybody, you could put Jackson Dart there, he'd probably have a good situation. And I like Purdy a ton, but if that's what you're saying as a defense of drafting Shedeur Sanders high, I'm not sure it really fits. Or Jackson Dart. Not sure it really fits. It's hard to build a team that good. Dusty says, is corner becoming the new running back? Yeah, kind of. You can get corners in free agency. I just think that what happens is teams are willing to spend on them first round picks, but I think draft analysts overrate that. It's really become edge rushers, defensive tackles, offensive tackles for sure, quarterbacks, wide receivers. That's what's getting taken in the first round and at the very top of the first round. We really saw that last year. Who was the first defensive player taken? It was like 14 or something last year. Teams are putting a lot of focus on those absolute premium positions, and corner has kind of slid a little bit, partly because they're hard to predict. They're so scheme dependent outside of the top guys like Surtain. And the other part of it is that there's a lot of them available in free agency. Every year, a ton of corners hit the free agent market, and you can go out and get them a lot easier than some other positions. Um, and I also think that they do, like running backs, have a bit of a shelf life for their age, but not quite in the same way. Maybe a little bit. I think Derek's right with corner. It's high variance. Doesn't have the highest hit rate. Yeah, teams are afraid of them a little bit. Where offensive tackles, I mean, you get a great offensive tackle. I think there's a um, very, very high percentage if you take one of the best offensive tackles in the draft. But that could be the Vikings gain. I mean, look at Quinyon Mitchell last year, Cooper DeJean, those guys, and even DeJean. He was his consensus was like 22nd or something. He ends up in the second round. So I think one of these corners will be there if they want them. TRZ03 hypothetical question for a lot of Vikings fans wanted Bo Nix last year. A year later, would you rather have him over McCarthy? Can't be a wait and see right now answer. Okay. Well, I was impressed with Bo Nix in the second half of the season last year. Very impressed. He did not have a running game. Good offensive line. Very good offensive line. Doesn't really have wide receivers and found a way to get his team to the playoffs. That is impressive. It's a hard question because you already know what the floor is on Bo Nix. You just saw it, that he can make the playoffs and win 10 games. That's pretty good. Is the ceiling on Bo Nix? Now, we haven't seen him get a great offense around him, and they're probably going to draft some people to try to do that. But we haven't seen Bo Nix with a great offense around him. That would be the difference for me of why I would go McCarthy because, well, no, I guess you're saying if Bo Nix was here. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. Because if Bo Nix is here, then he's got Jefferson, he's got Addison, he's got all the stuff that the Vikings could give him. Um, that's going to be a tough comparison to make if Bo Nix doesn't get much better offensive weapons and McCarthy does. McCarthy, I think, is a little more on the raw skill scale than McCarthy or than Bo Nix. Arm strength, they're both pretty quick. I mean, they're drafted right next to each other. That's a hard one to say. Yeah, because we already know what Bo Nix' worst case scenario is. We've already seen it. The rookie year is the toughest year in the NFL, and the guy played well and got his team into the playoffs. But I still think I would rather have McCarthy than Bo Nix based on what I think the upside is. But it's not going to be a fair fight because one of them has Justin Jefferson and the other one doesn't. That's a good question, though. That's a very good question. I don't think you would go with Bo Nix, but he's got one playoff appearance and JJ McCarthy hasn't played yet. I still think McCarthy has a little higher ceiling than Nix. Rob says, do you think KOC will automatically start JJ week 1? If Darisaw was out, they're on the road at Cleveland, facing Garrett or Abdul Carter, TJ Watt, or, and Steele. Yeah, they're going to start JJ McCarthy. It's the NFL, man. You can't avoid edge rushers. I mean, good luck trying to avoid edge rushers. Look at this schedule. You got to play Aiden Hutchinson twice. Montez Sweat is still a really good player. What team in the league is running nothing out there at that position? The Vikings have Jonathan Grenard, Rashawn Gary's in Green Bay. Every team has got some freak that you're going to have to stop, and you're not always going to have perfect circumstances. I'm not trying to hide JJ McCarthy. If he's ready to play, he's ready to play. Go play him. All right, a couple more, then I got to get Clay in here. I promised I would get him into the show earlier, and you guys made me wrong with these great questions. So, but he knew what he got into. Let's see. Evan says, remember when you said teams don't show us their draft board a few episodes back? What are the odds, Dallas? Yeah. The odds, Dallas has made that into a bit. I don't even know if their draft boards that they put on TV are real at this point. Because they always find a way, or on Twitter, they always find a way to be able to do that by accident or whatever. I think that the first time was an accident. And then after that, it might be a bit. I'm not really sure though, but you're right. Teams don't show us before the draft who they're going to draft. Skywalking McCarthy, I think a run stuffing DL as a priority in the draft, whether it's Grant, Caldwell, Jackson, Watson, Tyleek Williams, also an option there. Doesn't matter. We lost our run stopping DLs this offseason, need replacements. Those are guys, as you saw, that are pretty easily replaced in free agency if you want them. Taki Taimani's probably an answer there. Jalen Redmond, I think, is more of a run stopping guy than a true pass rusher. I think he had one pressure He gets in the backfield in the run game, though. So I look at it as if you can get a guy that is a absolute difference maker, like Grant, or later on, someone like Caldwell, who is enormous, then yeah, I think nose tackle is a position that they would like to have. And all those Belichick teams usually had those guys. Most of them usually had those guys. Rob says 3D chess. I wonder if Kwesi will use 2026 picks to target QB needy teams on day 2 for a trade up. Could happen. I mean, that everything is on the board. I wouldn't want them to reach into the 2026 bucket anymore unless they have to. John says, I think we need to be careful of what positions we draft this year, especially for defense. With all these random ideas for defensive positions, we're assuming that Flores will be here forever. Well, if you draft somebody like, and I see what you're saying, because I was talking about what would Brian Flores do. I do think Brian Flores is going to be here a long time. It's possible he gets a head coaching job at some point, but he just had a top 5 defense. They won 14 games. He got a couple of interviews, but the lawsuit is still out there. Just seems like that's not happening. He's going to keep trying and he's deserving, but it just seems like it's not happening. I think you might be able to make that argument, but if you're talking about Will Johnson or Jade Barron or Malachi Starks or Derek Harmon, all these guys, they can fit into a different system. And I also don't think that KOC is going to change the system. If Brian Flores leaves, my guess would be that Durante Jones would take over and they would continue to do exactly what they've been doing defensively. Julio says, I've been doing some homework on the running back class. There you go. Get a neck roll for that. Wide receiver class, have some guys no one's talking about. Let me know what y'all think. So I'm assuming that you're leaving those guys down here somewhere. Okay, LaQuint Allen reminds me of Adrian Peterson. He's a sleeper. Okay, there we go. All right. LaQuint Allen. I have not heard of that player, but if you're doing enough research looking for running back sleepers that remind you of Adrian Peterson that I haven't heard of, you get a neck roll for that. I appreciate the effort. Thank you. Okay. I reached the bottom of the comments and I don't know if it's a new record for that, but an hour 23 is pretty good. That means it's time to bring in intern Clay for Clay's Corner at the University of Pennsylvania, and a guy who is just enraged with jealousy over my former intern getting to cover the Masters this weekend. How are you, Clay? You got big shoes, my friend. Big shoes to fill.
I'm good. No jealousy at all. Just all inspiration. So it's cool to see people who have been where I'm at now and see where they can go. So it's cool to see.
Well, and I have all the faith in the world that you can get there yourself, Clay. But that all hinges on Clay's Corner today. If you mess it up, it's actually the second most important corner next to Amen Corner at the Masters. So it is that important and vital that you succeed here. So where would you like to begin?
Yep. So first off, Derek Carr is dealing with a shoulder injury that could keep him out of all next season. And what should the Saints do? What's their best option at quarterback?
Fold the franchise. That's what they should do. I mean, they are, if we ranked all 32 teams on a how bleeped are you meter, they might be number one. They find a way to sign players in the offseason. They are still screwed with the cap. They can only spend so much money. They do not have young players that you look at and go, wow, they've got this guy coming, that guy coming. In fact, some of their best players are still super old. And their coach, I think, has a lot of potential, but he's never coached before. And now he's handed this situation where they're talking about, are they going to just start Spencer Rattler and win 2 games and try to draft Arch Manning? I mean, that's pretty bleak, but that's actually the only way out of this. I really think it's the only way out of this is to go full Jimmy Clausen mode, which the Panthers played Jimmy Clausen for an entire season to make sure they got Cam Newton. That's the way out. It's the one and only direction out. If they go sign Aaron Rodgers or they draft Shadur Sanders, I mean, what are you giving Shadur Sanders? Like a broken version of Chris Olave, that other guy who's fast. I mean, there's nothing. They don't have a good offensive line. They don't have an experienced coach who can kind of navigate them through it. I just, the only way out is them to just be a total disaster, which, as Gazinkad points out, Vikings fans are very upset about. I actually think that the Saints are maybe the number one most hated team by Vikings fans next to the Packers. I think Packers is one, and then Saints, and then Eagles, I think. But there's like a healthy respect for the Eagles. Their fans are pretty nasty when you go there, but there's a respect because the Eagles do a lot of things right. And like, well, they win because they did a lot of stuff good. But with the Saints, real nastiness there. But anyway, what do you think they'll do?
Yeah, it's such an unfortunate situation for them. If I was a Saints fan, I'd be miserable right now. I'd be absolutely going through it. And my first reaction was they have to pitch Shador at 9, but like you said, that's not going to really do much. He has a long way to go, and with a team in this situation, it's not looking good. And I just feel bad for Kellen Moore. He has his hands full going into his first full year, but yeah, it's just really unfortunate for them. And if they don't go Shador at 9, what what do they do? Where does it matter what they do? I don't. It's just they're in a rough spot right now, and it's hard to predict where they'll be at or how they'll handle it.
Well, clearly they didn't see this coming because otherwise they would have done something else at the backup quarterback position. They would have jumped in, and maybe this could complicate the Carson Wentz thing if that's who they decide to go for. But it seems like they are really in a spot where they were taken off guard. And there was no reporting on this whatsoever. And then all of a sudden it just kind of comes out. It wasn't like, oh, Derek Carr's been dealing with something for a long time. And that's why they're picking up Drew Lock or whatever else. They just let all the other backup quarterbacks come off the board. And now they're holding the bag. I think that if they decided to pick Shador Sanders, they would be putting him into a bottom 5 overall situation and also putting their head coach in a spot where he's forced to take a quarterback. And I don't ever like when that happens. I don't ever like when a team is absolutely forced to reach for a quarterback. That's where it feels like the Giants taking Daniel Jones or something. Like well, Eli's pretty much done. So they just kind of have to take somebody. So they do it and it doesn't work out. I don't know. Yep. That's it's funny though, how often it happens where a team that has an all-time great quarterback and they are just so, and this is the Patriots, they're so full of themselves. Oh, it's the Patriot way. Oh, the Saints are so classy with Drew Brees and they're just run so brilliantly. And look what they do with the cap. And look at that one draft they had. Oh my gosh, they're geniuses. Sean Payton, he's just God's gift to coaching. Oh, we should make a Netflix about him and have Kevin James play it. And all this stuff is just so brilliant. Everybody gets to be a genius. Brady goes, everyone's a dope. The same thing for New Orleans. As soon as Drew Brees retires, nobody knows what they're doing anymore unless you get the next great guy. So kind of funny how football works like that.
Yeah, just reemphasizes how important the quarterback position is. Just can completely set back franchises for years and years. So
Tyler Huntley's available.
yeah, go get Snoop. All right. Anyway, so for my next question, Patrick Peterson retired as a Arizona Cardinal today, and you got to cover him for a year. So are there any moments that stick out to you or things that you remember from his time with the Vikings? And then also, who were some of your other favorite DBs from the Pat Pete era?
Yeah, so he was a Viking for 2 years, but 1 year we weren't allowed in the locker room because of COVID. So we didn't really get to know him all that well. And then his second year, he was our media good guy of the year because he was one of the most available players that I've ever been around for a superstar like that. Normally, your superstars do press conferences, and then sometimes you can ask for them on the side if you have something specific to write about, but that's usually how it works. Like with a Justin Jefferson, they get so many requests, the biggest players in the league, that the PR is trying to kind of manage all the different media for somebody like that. Peterson was always available, always willing to talk, always so open. And it just stood out to me that Peterson was the perfect intersection of athletic gifts, a complete freak show of an athlete. He's a great golfer. He's a great basketball player. When he came out, he's running a 4.3 or whatever. He returned 3 punts for touchdowns in a single season. This guy was a psycho. But as he aged, what you really saw from him was his brilliance as a player, where he gets those 2 interceptions in Buffalo. He knew exactly where they were going with the football, and he could be at places before anybody else knew that the ball was going there. And it really stood out when we got to talk with him, when you would ask him to break things down, and his incredibly high intelligence. But the other part was his competitiveness. And it was one of the most fun things to see when, I mean, think about this, a Hall of Fame career. And I did an article with him about why he kept playing. After he was done in Arizona, he had a 10-year Hall of Fame career. Like, why are you still here? It's not for the paycheck. He had made tons of money. And he said he just wanted to keep chasing a Super Bowl, which was pretty cool. And I remember when they played Arizona, because he was still really ticked off about how it had ended in Arizona. And he was so emotional and so worked up. And again, this is a guy who doesn't even need to be here and is putting that much juice, that much competitiveness, that much violence into that game and energy into that game. It's like, that's what if you want to know what a Hall of Famer looks like, folks, that's it. Competitiveness, intelligence, toughness. I mean, he's not Steve Atwater out there, but for the amount of games that he played, being on the field, availability takes a lot of toughness and hard work in the NFL, and then the physical traits to make it happen. It was really cool. I mean, there's how many Hall of Famers do you cover in a career? Justin Jefferson, I think, has got a great chance to be one. Patrick Peterson, that's probably it for all the players that I've covered that will go to the Hall of Fame. Maybe Harrison Smith, we'll see. So that was a great experience. How about, let me throw this back at you. So you like wide receivers, of course, but where's Pat P for you? We're watching football for corners, for the coolest corners. Because I think the other thing about him too, it's all that stuff is great. There's a vibe. There's a Pat P vibe that he has. I think he's one of the coolest corners. We talked about cool receivers. I think he's one of the coolest corners to play.
Yeah, growing up, he was definitely one of the players that I was drawn to, even though I was an offensive guy. I'm more looking for the receivers and the quarterbacks, but seeing 21 in Arizona with the dark visor and his arm sleeve and how fast he was, like, being fast is cool. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it just is. And he was blazing fast. And like you said, his competitive fire, you could just see it from a mile away. And I always like going back and watching his mic'd up moments of when he played Calvin Johnson and just seeing how he was like preparing for it and his mentality. It was just awesome to see. Not a lot of DBs made me feel that way. Another one, kind of in that time, Darrelle Revis. I know he was a little bit before, but talk about pure dominance. That 2009 year was just unbelievable. I think he owns the greatest sports graphic ever, where it's like the 8 elite or Hall of Fame receivers that he held under like 40 yards. So he's another guy that I think about when I'm thinking of the cool DBs.
I'd have to think. I mean, outside of Revis just owned so much of that conversation for such a long time. But I will throw a Viking out there that was one of my favorite players, and I don't know if how many times I've mentioned this on the show. Sometimes people will ask me, because I grew up in Buffalo, like, "Oh, are you a Bills fan?" And the answer is always not really. When I was a little kid, yes. Because that was Jim Kelly and Andre Reed, Thurman Thomas, and Bruce Smith, and they were going to Super Bowls. And then Flutie came along, and that was great too. Flutie Flakes, the guy was crazy fun to watch. It was some of the best. Wade Phillips was their head coach. Really fun teams until the Music City Miracle thing happened, which was a forward pass. But then after that, their ownership became very cheap, and they let Antoine Winfield go. Antoine Winfield Sr. They let him go to Minnesota. So I continued to follow his career in Minnesota, but I completely gave up on the Bills franchise. I was just like, I'm out. I'm just out. Like, they had some cool players. They had like Takeo Spikes, London Fletcher, Travis Henry, but I can't cheer for this team. I was probably a teenager. Like, I can't cheer for this team if they're letting that guy go. And Pat Williams too. And they both ended up here. Antoine Winfield, greatest pound for pound tackler, corner that I think the league has seen in a long time. His son certainly is reflective of his play, but talk about cool. How about a guy who's 5'8", taking down 230-pound running backs like it's nothing? That was probably one of the coolest. And then for me, here it comes. Here it comes. Dion. I mean, some of us watch Dion actually play football and not just coach Colorado. And Rod Woodson would be the other one. Rod Woodson, he was an all pro corner and then later in his career, either Pro Bowl or all pro safety, which is crazy to be able to move. And he had a cool face mask too, played for great defenses. So your point about how the corner looks, 100%. And I think Xavier Rhodes for fans was a pretty cool corner too. Somebody who was gigantic and had really freakish movement skills. So they're out there. You're
Yeah.
a wide receiver guy, but they're out there.
It's funny you mentioned the Bills. This guy's probably not that cool, but someone I really liked, Micah Hyde.
Oh yeah, yeah.
During that Peterson era. It seems random, but I was lucky enough to work out with him for an off season, and he showed me that there's levels to this football stuff, and he is one of the craziest athletes I've ever seen. I've never seen him tired, and it just made me a fan of his. So I was watching his career as he went on, and that's why I was a big fan of his.
Every time I see it pop up, and not recently, but every once in a while, you'll see I could get a couple yards on an NFL field. You're like, nope. You could get a couple of broken bones and a couple of trips to the hospital and maybe surgeries, but you could not because Micah Hyde's he's just a guy, right? It's like 5'10" or 11, whatever. He would kill you with his bare hands. Yep.
Yeah, I had no idea it was him when I first walked up. I'm doing my dynamic stretches, and he's talking to the trainer about like Lamborghinis. I'm like, who is this guy? And then the more and more I kind of started putting the pieces together to talk about Buffalo, I'm like, whoa, this is Micah Hyde. So yeah, super cool.
That is a very cool story.
Yeah.
What else you got?
So for my third question, every draft has some kind of surprise, but some picks end up exceeding all expectations. Which NFL pick or draft pick caught you off guard but ended up being a big success, or were there guys that people were skeptical about but you had your eye on that turned out to be a star, or just some big draft surprises that you remember?
Well, I think the biggest draft surprise, I think this was the first time that I had worked a draft on radio. And as the day is progressing, we start to hear some strange rumors about this offensive tackle who's supposed to go pretty high. And we're like, well, what's now there's word that he could drop. And there's pictures of him smoking weed in a gas mask as Laramie Tunsil. And we're like, huh? So then our radio station had somebody who did a lot of partaking. So then he became the expert on the air about how and this was not me, guys, but just a coworker of mine. He explained how someone would use a gas mask to do that. And I'm not even sure that today the NFL wisely moved on from all that stuff and just said, like, whatever, dude, if it's not performance enhancing, do whatever you do. But at that time, there was still enough concern over guys who were big weed smokers that they were going to have problems off the field. And there's probably some truth to that, depending on how much you do. But the gas mask ball did not keep Laramie Tunsil. So I was big on somebody should just draft this guy. Like if he's falling, I mean, just take him. Like this is where I came up with always draft the weed guy. And that used to be my thing until the NFL stopped caring, because another guy that I was really huge on that I thought it was shocking that he dropped because of how good he was Tyrann Mathieu. He got thrown out of college for smoking too much weed, which what level do you have to do to get thrown out of LSU? But I was like, have you seen this guy? You talk about cool corners, cool defensive backs. So I was pounding the table nonstop for somebody who I think I was, in Buffalo at the time, like draft this guy. And then he became, I think, one of the best defensive backs of the last decade. So those were a couple of, I didn't mean to necessarily turn this into, here's all the guys that smoked weed that I thought everyone should draft, but those are definitely the guy. Oh, and maybe one other is kind of obvious here, but I was apoplectic that Lamar Jackson was dropping in the draft, just losing my mind. And, kind of nailed that one.
Yeah, for good reason, as we can see now. But one big surprise for me was in 2020 when the Packers drafted Jordan Love in the
Oh
first
yeah.
round. I thought the Packers were trying to do everything except help Aaron Rodgers because I think this was the stretch where they lost 3 NFC championships in 5 years, and they still go out and draft a quarterback round one instead of trying to find the piece to get him over the hump. So that one was surprising and also funny because screw the Packers. But then another one was Jameer Gibbs in 23. I just didn't know who he was leading up to the draft, and then they picked him so high, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And these past 2 years, he's shown me exactly who he is. So I understand why he was drafted so high. But the the one player that I thought was going underrated that ended up being a star got to be Jalen Hurts. I saw him play at Oklahoma. I was doing a visit at UCLA, and unfortunately, UCLA got smacked because Jalen Hurts was putting up 300 pass yards, 3 touchdowns. He had 150 more on the ground. I was so impressed with him, and then when you take that, like his play and his size and everything, and then match it with the adversity he faced at Alabama and how he handled the whole thing, I just thought it showed a lot of class, and I thought he should have definitely been a first round pick. But who am I?
Alex, our resident Packer fan, not happy with the comment. I'm sorry, Alex. It's what happens sometimes when you walk into unfriendly territory. Um, the Jalen Hurts thing was another one for me. I thought, there's old tweets on these that the Vikings should have picked him and they should have developed him behind Kirk Cousins and then been ready to have a succession plan there. And they did not pick him, but they did pick Justin Jefferson in 2020. So I guess that was probably a good choice. And I said earlier, but Justin Jefferson was one of the biggest shocks. I thought there was no freaking way that Justin Jefferson would end up dropping that far. I was actually really shocked by Christian Darrisaw too. He got to 24 and the Jets traded up for Elijah Vera Tucker, who's still a good player, but that was crazy. And then I only found out later, and this is really, really funny. I only found out later that one of the reasons he fell was that he was too chill in like his interviews, which is funny because if you know Darisaw, he is like the most relaxed guy. And, how many superstar left tackles who make 30 million a year just sit at their locker and you could go up to him and be like, "What's up, man? Can I ask you a question?" Where, how I mentioned like the superstars. I mean, with this team, Jonathan Grenard's that way. The superstars kind of are that way with this team, but I mean, he's just the most regular, relaxed, laid back type of guy. And I think that they were fooled a little bit. He's also kind of soft spoken, quiet. He is a violent man on the field, though. And they did not give that enough credit, I guess. And you think about the people that the Vikings have been able to draft without top 10 picks. Darisaw, Addison, Jefferson's like Addison's too small. Darisaw is too chill and Jefferson played in the slot too much. I mean, those just unbelievable. And I was just as shocked that Jalen Reagor went before Justin Jefferson. I just could not believe it because he was a second round, third round type of player. And again, to the Vikings' benefit.
Yep, it worked out for the Vikings. Yeah. So, sorry, Alex. Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't mean to be harsh, but it is what it is. Sometimes I can't hold back on the Packers all the
I
time.
think I think most of the audience is probably fine with your comment.
Yeah. Well, for my last question, we've been talking a lot about cool players at different positions. I guess this will be the last one. We can kind of move on. I want to talk about the coolest college quarterbacks because we don't really Cam Ward's nonchalant. I wouldn't really call that cool, but I don't care what they did in the NFL, how bad they were. Who were your coolest college quarterbacks?
So I think what you mean is like cool, but we're coming out in the draft and you're rooting for them kind of no matter where they get picked. But hey, this guy was really awesome. Is that where we're
Yeah.
going with that?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the first name that comes to mind for me is Pat White. And he was drafted in '09. And I don't know how much of a Pat White remember you are, but the guy was so much fun. He was one of the dynamic running quarterbacks, big arm, but played in this wide open offense, put up tons of crazy statistics. I can see if I can find his numbers here. Pat White's college stats. They got to be nuts. But he wasn't really set for the NFL. Now, if it was today's NFL, then he was at the top in terms of Heisman voting. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's stupid. I'm sorry. The rushing stats they include sacks. So even including sacks, he ran for 4,400 yards in college and then threw 56 more touchdowns, 66% completion percentage, top 10 in the Heisman 2 straight years. This guy was as fun. Oh, Colt Brennan is a great answer, Derek. This guy was as fun as any college quarterback I've ever seen. And he was one where you get the new Madden game, you get Pat White. Like you want him to be your quarterback right away. And unfortunately, it did not work out for Pat White. Again, if this was today, they would have built an offense around him. They would have had him running and on the move. He might look like a Jaden Daniels, but instead, that did not work out. And there is absolutely a trend to my answers here because Vince Young is another one that, I mean, I was a Vince Young. I will fight you in an alley over Vince Young. I love the guy. Even when he was with Tennessee and struggling to complete passes, I was still like, this guy's awesome. He wins games. He finds a way. He's got a big heart. He's clutch. All those things that I shouldn't say about a guy just because he won a big college game, but I don't care. I watched that game against USC and I was like, I'm all in on Vince Young. That bet did not work out very well. Those are probably two of the biggest ones. One more, Jake Locker. I thought Jake Locker was just this tough athlete who's going to run over people. He was going to fight you and he was tough and he was going to figure out a way. I kind of, for whatever reason, like those quarterbacks that were imperfect, but found a way to win. Doesn't always work so much in the NFL. I couldn't stand Peyton Manning coming out because like everyone's talking about he's so perfect. Oh, he's just this, his dad's in the NFL and he's just this flawless prospect. Who wants that? I want a guy who has to fight his way to victory.
I want a dog.
Right. I want a dog. And none of those guys ended up working out very well, but they were guys that I thought were a lot of fun and ultimately got drafted and just, didn't click.
Yeah. Well, what I got a dog for you. I got Baker Mayfield as one of my top guys. I think just because of the fact that he walked on to 2 programs, bet on himself, won the job, and did what he did. It's just that's cool. And yeah, he was off his leash at sometimes, but that's what it was. That was his chip, and I thought it was cool just seeing someone at the quarterback position play with that kind of attitude because we don't see that a lot. And I guess the complete opposite of him, but I still think is cool, was Joe Burrow. Mm-hmm. I thought he was like the definition of cool, just calm, cool, collected, leading the greatest college football offense and winning a championship, having the Burrow at Death Valley on his jersey. It's just, yeah, he was cool.
Were you a Johnny Manziel believer or not?
Like believer for the league? No, but God, was he fun in college. And it's so crazy to think about him because I always think about Kyle Field. And it is what it is today because of Johnny Manziel. That $450 million that got put into this stadium was all off Johnny Manziel's back. So I still will never forget when he jumped over like a lineman, hit his own lineman, bounced off, scrambled to the left, jump past. It was like people don't do that stuff in Madden. So
Troy Smith is a great answer. I was always rooting for Terrell Pryor. I know he became a receiver and had somewhat of a career for a receiver, but I thought, and this take has aged pretty well. That whole thing of the guy got some free tattoos was so stupid to me. Oh, Reggie Bush, someone gave him a car. Okay. I mean, oh my gosh, call the police. Like, what are we doing here? And now these guys are getting $1 million contracts and Lamborghinis and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And we've all just been like, oh, now it's fine. But before, they treated these guys like they were criminals if you did something like this. Like, you got a free tattoo? And they ran Jim Tressel out of Ohio State. What are we doing here? Which, of course, it didn't just change. It changed super fast and in the most insane way possible because the NCAA dropped the ball on that one. But Terrell Pryor was a pretty cool quarterback at first. because he could run, he could make plays, that kind of thing. I do think that the cool, I mean, has there been one recently that has that same level of cool as Joe Burrow? Probably not. I don't think Caleb Williams has a cool factor to him. I think he's fun to watch, but he does
Yeah, I
not
don't.
have like Joe Burrow seems like any room you go into, everybody wants to be around Joe Burrow. I don't know that that's really the case for Caleb Williams, and some of the reason I didn't really love him as much as the rest of the world coming out. But I don't know if there's been one recently that you could say, man, this guy's vibe is crazy, regardless of whether he's good or not. That was actually, it hasn't worked out, but sort of similar for me for Justin Herbert. I just thought this guy's got no vibe. I
I
need a guy. I need a guy with a vibe.
I did not like Justin Herbert at all. I knew some people that went to Oregon at the time, and somebody told me that he like cried after losing a bit, like not even a big game. It was just like a normal game, and he cried. And I don't know why that turned me off of him, but that was just my whole analysis of him. Just like he's crying after regular games. Like I need a guy tougher than that. But
Well, that was the Caleb Williams thing where he it wasn't just the cry thing. It was like a game against Washington. I mean, it's a fairly big game, but it's not like it was the game of a lifetime or the game. And in the NFL, the emotions run so high that you do need to be able to control them. So there were some people who wanted to say, like, don't ever talk about that. It's okay for men to cry. I'm like, I'm not saying it's not okay for men to cry. We're talking about the NFL and how you manage the emotion of it. And I've always felt like with Herbert, that was the one thing that was missing was the little bit of FU in his game that Burrow clearly has. I mean, I think as far as, people bringing up JJ McCarthy, it's one of the reasons he got drafted, I think. I don't know if I would look at him with the same level of cool factor as Joe Burrow, but if you're talking about that leadership aura, he absolutely has that. That's a
yeah,
little bit of different.
he's a little too hippie and meditative to be cool. But yeah, he definitely has the leadership and the mindset to go win games. So
Yeah, I think that's true. What else you got?
that's all I had on my list. That's it for me.
Okay. Well, here's what I think. So Clay's corner, great questions, but I think the new homework assignment is as you're listening to me answer the questions, you got to come up with some take you disagree with or that you don't like. That should be that's the new thing. We're always adding levels to this.
All right, that's
That's
fair.
the next thing cuz I'll talk with the fans for an hour and something. You got to find some take where you're like, "No, that's a bad take."
Yep, I'll get on that because we have been in agreement mode for a while. I used to fight back a little bit right after the season ended, but we've been on agreement mode. But if you want me to, I'll look. I'll look. I'll
But there's got to be something with this much chatter to disagree with. Although we are in a spot with the Vikings where you can almost talk anybody into anything. Where it's like, do you want an offensive guard? Oh yeah, it's a good idea. How about a defensive tackle? Also a good idea.
uh,
But what about a safety? Oh yeah, that sounds good. So there hasn't been a lot of controversy, but we'll definitely work on that. So thank you for your time, as always, Clay. And thank you all for your great questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so forth. This is going to be a really fun week. So if you're not subscribed, I would definitely try to do that. And go check out purpleinsider.football as well, where I wrote about the 2003 Vikings draft that I was watching back today. So, yeah, you know what? We will next week, or actually Thursday. Let's do that, Evan. That's a great idea. We need to get a Clay mock. That's a good idea. Intern Clay mock is a great idea. So that's going to be his homework assignment for this week. But Sam Brookhouse from Sumer Sports, they are releasing some very fascinating draft coverage. Trevor Sickham is coming up. Chris Trapasso. It's going to be a huge week. Also, later in the week, we're going to hear from the Vikings general manager. Remember when I told you guys after the thing about the Rodgers press conference that I promised he would talk again sometime? Well, he's going to. So we'll have coverage of that as well out from TCO Performance Center. So I appreciate everybody having the conversation as usual, and we will see you all again very soon. Football